Hey, what's going on, football fans? Welcome back to the channel. If you're new to this channel, be sure to subscribe and also hit the thumbs up down below on this video. Alrighty, so another week of college football is in the books. Not a whole lot of action in this past week in terms of upsets. So what I'll be doing in this video, like I've been doing for the last several weeks now, is giving my college football playoff bracket, who I think will be seated where, who's in, who's out, all that good stuff. All right, so if you guys watched last week's video, I added a new segment. I had the first four out for the first couple of weeks, and then last week I added the next four out of the playoffs. So let's go ahead and let's do the first four out of the college football playoff. So my first four out is Notre Dame, Indiana, Kansas State, and Pitt. So Notre Dame, they had a very good win, a very convincing win against Navy this past weekend. And Navy was one of those teams that was still in contention for that group of five spot. But unfortunately for Navy, that's pretty much over now. Indiana, they had another big win over Washington. But again, as I've said before with Indiana, you know, it's a great story with them being undefeated, first-year head coach, all that stuff. But Indiana, they got to get a quality win. And unfortunately for them, you know, the only chance that they have is coming up here in a couple of weeks at Ohio State. And I know Indiana, their quarterback was injured also. So Indiana's still very much in the fight, though, as far as making the playoffs. Kansas State, they had a win against their rival Kansas this past weekend. And then I've moved Pitt up to the first four out. So Pitt, they haven't, up until this week, or last week I should say, they haven't really played anybody. They played a pretty decent Syracuse team. They beat them pretty handily too. And they're still undefeated. And they're still in contention in the ACC also. So they do have a big game coming up this week at SMU. And so, and that's essentially an elimination game as far as the ACC championship and maybe the playoffs. And speaking of SMU, I have moved them up to the next four out. So my next four out is LSU, Alabama, and I already mentioned SMU, and then Ole Miss. So I think Ole Miss is still in the mix despite having two losses. But LSU, they had an opportunity this past weekend to get a good win on the road at Texas A&M, and it just didn't happen. Now, LSU and Alabama, they actually play each other next week. I believe they both have bye weeks this week. So whoever loses that game is most definitely out of the playoffs. But one thing with LSU, they have two losses, and that first loss was to a very bad USC team. USC is not very good, and they lost that game, and that's starting to look more and more bad. So, and then Alabama, you know, they had that big win, a convincing win against Missouri this past weekend. And then SMU, they had a big overtime win against Duke. And SMU, they're a team that's playing better, and they're a team that very well could be dangerous in terms of the ACC. And as I've mentioned before, they do play Pitt this weekend. And then Ole Miss, you know, I still think they're in the mix, but their chances are still pretty slim in my opinion. You know, they had that loss to Kentucky, and then a few weeks later they lose to LSU. So I still think LSU is Ole Miss is in the fight, though. All right, so now those are the teams that are out, in my opinion. Now let's do the first round buys. So as I've mentioned before, these are your conference champions. Number one is Oregon. Oregon, they're clearly the best team in the country right now. They had a pretty big win at home versus Illinois, and Illinois is pretty good. So that was a good win for Oregon. Number two, I have Georgia. Georgia was off this week, but they do play their annual matchup against Florida in Jacksonville, and so I don't expect anything to change in that regard. And then number three, I have Miami. So Miami, they beat Florida State. I know Florida State's bad this year, but Miami, they just keep finding ways to win. And it wasn't the prettiest of games from Miami, but they still beat Florida State in really good fashion. And then I still have Iowa State. I still think they're the best team in the Big 12 right now. And so I have Oregon, Georgia, Miami, and Iowa State as the automatic qualifiers. Now we go to the first round games, or the first round of the playoffs, and still I have Boise State at number 12. I still think Boise is the best Group of 5 team out there, although they had a very good win this past Friday. They were on the road against a very good UNLV team, and so I think this was a very good win for Boise. So I still have them at number 12. And then number 11, I have BYU. BYU, a lot of people I think had written them off. I still think BYU is a very good team. And so they had a win against, I think it was UCF this past week. And so BYU, they're still very much in the race as far as the Big 12 goes, and certainly the college football playoff. Number 10, I have Texas A&M. So Texas A&M, they still are, they're still undefeated in SEC play, and they only have one loss on the season, and that was to Notre Dame, and that was the season opener. And that's starting to not look as bad as it once did. I know Notre Dame, they had that loss to Northern Illinois, but Notre Dame has gotten better. They've gotten significantly better. And so I like what I'm seeing out of Texas A&M. They made the switch at quarterback from Connor Wegman to that other quarterback, Reed. And he's really good, very mobile. And so we'll see what A&M does going forward. So I have A&M at number 10. Number 9 and number 8, Tennessee and Clemson. Neither team played this past week, so I'm going to keep them where they are. Tennessee, they're playing against Kentucky. Clemson plays against Louisville, and so both of those teams, talking about Louisville and Kentucky, they've been kind of up and down this year. So, but I'm going to keep Clemson and Tennessee at 8 and 9. Number 7, I have Penn State. So Penn State, they got a big game coming up this weekend against Ohio State. The big question mark is their quarterback. Is Drew Aller going to be healthy? He did get hurt in their last game, and if he doesn't play, then that could spell trouble for Penn State. And so we'll see how things turn out. But I have Penn State at 7. I have Texas still at number 6. Texas, after that loss that they took to Georgia, they bounced back and got a pretty good win on the road against a Vanderbilt team that I think a lot of people overlooked that were wrong about, myself included. It was a close game, but Vandy's a good team. This isn't the same old Vandy that we've been used to seeing for years and years and years. So they bounced back and got themselves back in the win column. And then number 5, I still have Ohio State. So Ohio State, they had a close one at home versus Nebraska this past weekend. They did squeak out a win, but still, nonetheless, Ohio State, they're still very much in the mix as far as the playoffs go. Now, if they lose this game to Penn State, the question is, are they out? Are they still a playoff team? Because if they lose this game, Penn State is ranked number 3 in the country. If they lose this game, would they still be out? Because they did lose to Oregon on the road, and Oregon's the best team in the country. If they lost on the road to Penn State, would they still be out? So that's a question left to be answered. So that's my playoff bracket after Week 9. What does your bracket look like? Who do you think should be in? Who do you think should be out? Who do you guys think should be seated where? Let me know down below in the comments section, guys. And as always, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.